Welcome to a Healthy Push podcast. I'm Shannon Jackson, former anxiety sufferer turned adventure, mom, and anxiety recovery coach. I struggled with anxiety, panic disorder, and agoraphobia for 15 years. And now I help people to push past the stuff that I used to struggle with. Each week, I'll be sharing real and honest conversations along with actionable and practical steps that you can take to help you push past your anxious thoughts, the symptoms, panic, and fears. Welcome. You're right where you're meant to be. So, were you a little surprised to see this topic pop up as an episode? Me too. I feel like this is not a typical episode of mine, but I'm really excited to dive into this topic and share with you 4 things that I mostly stay away from to help ease anxiety. But before I go into these 4 things, I want to touch base on a few things first. So the first thing is, with these 4 things, I am not saying avoid these 4 things and your anxiety will be gone. Because if you know me and you know everything that I teach, you already know that I don't believe there's any magic fixes or quick and simple things you can do to get rid of anxiety. And we're never trying to get rid of anxiety. Instead, we're doing our best to create a healthy relationship with it and a healthy relationship with ourselves. And creating a healthy relationship with yourself is really the key here with these 4 things. When you create a healthy relationship with yourself, it really helps in creating that healthy relationship with anxiety. Okay, so this one leads nicely into the next one. The second thing, I don't mostly stay away from these things in an effort to prevent myself from ever feeling anxious. Instead, I mostly stay away from these things because I recognize that my mind and my body are connected. And if I'm treating my mind and body with care and really supporting them, it's going to help me to just feel better and in turn experience less stress and overwhelm and anxiety. Okay, lastly, the third thing, I don't want to create any fear with what I'm sharing here or have you going and making a ton of changes because you're desperately wanting to feel better. Like, I get it, trust me, but making lots of changes and making decisions based out of a place of fear will only generate more fear and more anxiety. I simply want to share some things with you that have been helpful to me and to many of my students in hopes that it helps you to become more aware and maybe make some shifts that will be helpful to you too. Okay, now that those things are out of the way, let's jump into the 4 things. This first one, you're probably going to be like, what the heck? Like, this seems really out of the middle of nowhere. And I know, I get it. But the first one is I try my best to stay away from endocrine disruptors. And if you're like, endocrine disruptors, what? I get it. Because 5 years ago, I would have said the same thing. So I'm going to keep it really simple here. Endocrine disruptors are chemicals that can interfere with our body's hormones, which regulates functions like your metabolism, your growth, your development, sleep, fertility, reproduction. Like, I'm probably missing something here, but basically lots of really important functions in our bodies. And endocrine disruptors are in lots of things that we use and put on our bodies and put in our bodies on a daily basis. Things like plastics, deodorants, laundry detergent, soaps, body washes, makeup, cookware, foods. Literally, the list goes on and on. And once I learned about endocrine disruptors and I really started to pay attention to how these things were making me feel, and I could definitely notice it more so around the time of my cycle, I began to really recognize, like, there's something to this. Like, this just isn't one of those things that is put out there. I know there has been some big conversation, maybe a lot of buzz around endocrine disruptors, but I really think there's a reason for it. And when I began to make some changes, it really helped me significantly to just feel better in general, like my mental clarity, my physical health, and it helped to relieve some anxiety as well. So a few examples of some shifts I've made over time. I really try to avoid anything with fragrance. I avoid drinking out of plastic bottles, really anything plastic. I try to avoid storing food in plastic containers, like eating out of plastic containers. I try to eat as many whole foods and as much organic foods as I can. but I know this one's freaking hard because anything organic is just more expensive. And I know it can be a real challenge, but I do my best to eat mostly whole foods, mostly organic. And I also try my best to just stick to non-toxic products. And I don't want to overwhelm you here, but I want to share some brands, some switches that I've made that I really love. So for like my cleaning products in my home, I really stick to non-toxic. I use Branch Basics for pretty much everything. For my body, I use Bronner soap, which if you're familiar, it's been around for years and years and years. It's just like kind of natural oils. It's very natural. And it's like a multi-use product. So you can use it for soap. I think you can use it on your hair, even as toothpaste. Like it's definitely multi-use. For laundry detergent, I use Ecos. For deodorant and skincare products, I rely heavily on Primally Pure, and I love this company. They have so many great non-toxic natural products that my skin loves. For cookware, I use Caraway. I could go on and on and on, and I will add the link to these in the show notes for this episode so you can check them out if you're interested. But I want to say here, don't try to make all of the changes at once. When I started this whole journey with researching more about endocrine disruptors and learning more and figuring out where I could start, I literally started with switching out my shower curtains from plastic to a washable material. And I also switched all of my cleaning products to Branch Basics. So I've made a lot of changes, but it's been over the course of 5 years. So don't try to do it all at once. It's really not necessary, but just starting small and making small changes can make such a big difference. So I truly think and believe there's so much to endocrine disruptors, and I'll probably have an expert guest on actually now that I'm talking this through, because I would love to do a deeper dive into this topic. I truly believe it is so important to pay attention to what we're putting on our bodies and into our bodies and what's in our environments, because it all truly affects how we feel and function. Okay, the second thing, I try to avoid anything that messes with my sleep. And I know this might sound a little silly, but I am very serious about my sleep and my sleep patterns. And this is because I've always been able to see a pretty direct correlation between me not feeling so great and feeling and experiencing more anxiety when I don't prioritize my sleep. Like if I don't prioritize my sleep, it definitely affects my mental clarity, my mood, my capacity to feel, and just in general, my nervous system. Like I can feel it. I can feel myself being more on edge and irritable and emotional and just more mentally and physically tired, of course, if I'm not prioritizing my sleep. And I look back to when I was struggling with panic disorder and agoraphobia, and I now think, what the heck was I doing? Like I never really ever prioritized my sleep. I look back now to when I was struggling with panic disorder and agoraphobia really bad, and I think, what the heck was I doing? Like, I feel like sleep is such a basic thing, right? Like something that we all kind of know that we need to prioritize, but I rarely ever made it a priority. Like I would go to bed super late. I'd wake up really early for work. I would sleep in until noon or later on the weekends. Like I was all over the place with my sleep on a pretty routine basis. And being all over the place with your sleep and just not getting enough sleep definitely creates sleep problems and anxiety. So the big key here is to recognize, again, your mind and your body are connected. If you aren't supporting your body and by prioritizing sleep, right, especially when you're experiencing lots of anxiety, you're definitely going to experience some mental and physical symptoms that are going to lead to even more anxiety. So although I say this is a silly one, I think so many of us need to hear this because we're not doing so many of the basic things that can really support us. And when you really support your body, like I cannot emphasize how much, when you support your body, it really helps your mind and it really helps you to experience a lot less anxiety. So maybe this is just a gentle reminder and a little nudge that you may have needed to get back on track with your sleep, really prioritize it and acknowledge how important it is for your mind and your body. So nowadays, I pretty much faithfully stick to a sleep schedule and I rarely deviate from it. Like I go to bed at the same time every night and I wake up at the same time every morning. And this is something that I can see very clearly. It has helped me so much and it's something I don't think that I'll ever get away from. And of course, yes, there are nights here and there where I'm not going to bed at the same time and I'm not waking up at the same time in the morning, and that's okay. We're never aiming for always or to be super rigid with this stuff. But creating healthy habits and routines is a big part of how you can better support your mind and your body and experience less anxiety. Okay, number 3, I mostly avoid consuming alcohol. So here's some honesty. I've had quite a freaking journey with alcohol. And for a long time, especially while I was struggling with panic disorder and agoraphobia, it was a really unhealthy relationship. Like I would use alcohol in order to cope. I would use it to feel less anxious. I would use it to not have to process and feel hard things. I would use it to relieve social anxiety. I honestly used it very often as an escape. But when I really got real with myself and I looked at this relationship, I could see like it did not help me in all the ways that I thought it did. Like I thought, of course, it led to relaxation and less anxiety and happiness. But alcohol always made me feel worse on some level. Like I would typically always experience anxiety just hours after drinking. And I would always experience anxiety the day after or even days following drinking. And I don't know if you've heard of this thing called hangxiety, but it's definitely a thing. Like it's when you experience lots of anxiety after drinking. Because let's face it, a hangover, right, is awful and can bring on some of the worst symptoms. And then those symptoms, which are often very similar to the symptoms you experience when you're anxious, can cause you to experience even more anxiety. So I don't know if you've heard of hangxiety, but this is definitely a thing and something that I experienced all the freaking time when I was drinking. It's when you experience lots of anxiety after drinking. Because let's face it, right? A hangover is awful and can bring on some of the worst symptoms. And then those symptoms, which are often very similar to the symptoms you experience when you're anxious, can cause you to experience so much freaking anxiety because you're like, I feel awful. When is this going to end? And it just produces so much anxiety. It's basically a hangover times a million, and it's so not fun. And I think it's also important to recognize here that alcohol is a depressant. So yes, although in the moment, right, it can slow things down, it can sort of turn that dial down on anxiety and make you feel happier when you're drinking. It often leads to sadness and depression after the fact, which is what it always did for me. So when I got honest with myself about my relationship with alcohol, which took me way too freaking long to do, I made lots of changes. And where I'm at now today is I drink alcohol, but it's pretty rare. I probably have 3 to 4 drinks a month, and it's usually when I'm out to dinner, out with friends, or I'm at an event. And this works for me. You know, I never overdo it, and I'm very aware of how important it is for me to maintain this healthy relationship with alcohol that I've created. And, you know, I did go a stretch without drinking at all, and that was fine. That was good. But I just have never really felt like I need or want to be in a space where I have to say, I'm not drinking at all. And who knows, maybe someday that will be the case. But I think as long as you're being honest with yourself and really paying attention to the relationship it is that you have to alcohol or anything else, right? And who knows, maybe someday that'll be the case and I won't drink at all. But I think what's important is that you're always having an awareness, right? An awareness of your relationship with different things and whether or not it's healthy. And I want to say here that I know it's incredibly hard not to have coping mechanisms when you're struggling, right? We all do because we're human. But it's just really important to look at these coping mechanisms and really being honest with yourself about your relationship with them. You know, there is no shame in using alcohol as a coping mechanism. It makes sense. Of course, you're seeking something to make you feel better. But is it actually helping you to feel better? Or is it making you feel worse and actually keeping you stuck? This was the case for me, and a big reality that I didn't look at for far too long. And I wish if I could go back, this is a change I definitely would have made sooner. So being honest with yourself about these things is a big part of how the healing happens. Okay, number 4 and the last one, and you're probably going to be mad at me for this one and say, Shannon, what the heck? But I avoid staying in my comfort zone. And I know you might be like, God, I'm rolling my eyes right now. And trust me, I get it. But let me explain. So when I was struggling with anxiety, I stayed in my comfort zone, or what I thought was my comfort zone, for a long time and often. And it made things so freaking hard. Like I stuck to certain places, mostly places close to home or somewhere, quote, safe. I stuck to certain roads and routes, and I stuck to doing a lot of the same things. And doing this really kept me ruminating and feeling really anxious. It caused me to have such a lack of trust in myself. And it just led to me often feeling and being really limited and restricted. So one of the biggest lessons I learned in my recovery was this. Things are either hard because you're staying in your comfort zone or because you're pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. And the pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone always comes with the long-term rewards. More peace, joy, freedom, independence, confidence, self-trust. I could go on and on and on. So sure, it sucks definitely in the moment to push yourself, but it's what leads to all of the amazing long-term benefits that you're really wanting and fighting so hard for. But I know you might be thinking, like, Shannon, I don't push myself outside of my comfort zone because when I do, that leads to anxiety and I don't want to feel anxious. And yes, of course it does. And of course you don't want to feel anxious. Trust me, I understand. But this type of discomfort, when you push yourself and you feel anxious, it's short term. I know it does not feel that way. I know it feels horrible. I know it feels never ending. But pushing yourself to face fear and anxiety in small steps and practicing taking it with you really leads to more confidence, more self-trust. It makes you less reactive to anxiety-inducing situations. But I know you might be thinking, Shannon, I don't push myself outside of my comfort zone because when I do, that leads to so much anxiety and I don't want to feel anxious. And yes, of course it does. And of course you don't want to feel anxious. I understand. But this type of discomfort is short term. You're not always going to have to push yourself and feel anxious while driving or going to the store or while being home alone. I know it might not feel that way, but it does, and it will get better with small steps. The pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone is what gets you unstuck and helps you to heal. So nowadays, I push myself often. Like if you're on my email list or you follow me on social media, you probably see this. I recently started doing lots more solo hiking and adventuring and going on trips by myself and going on long road trips and flying and going to social events and meeting new people and trying new things. And the list goes on. I guess you could say, quote, exposure therapy never stopped, even though I recovered 7 years ago. Like a lot of the things didn't stop that I learned in my recovery. I continuously do these things because now I recognize how important it is to take care of your mind and body. But really, I guess I want to say here, what I'm doing is not really exposure therapy. I'm simply living out my values and what's important to me, and I'm taking fear and anxiety with me. Because this is a huge part of what helped me to heal, and it's a huge part of what continues to help me stay recovered. And it's what continues to help me build confidence and self-trust, and these things are so freaking important to me, which is why I will never stop pushing myself. I've really been able to see how much pushing myself has helped me to grow as a person and experience the things I want to experience in life and really get out of this life everything that I want. And I feel like I'll get emotional. I'm just starting. Like I truly feel that way. I am pushing myself and it feels so good, but I know there is so much more pushing to do. And there's so much more to this life that I'm going to experience. So is it hard? Of course it is. But it's also so incredibly worth it. So right now, I'm giving you a healthy push or a gentle nudge to check in with yourself and ask yourself, am I staying in my comfort zone? And is it actually comfortable? Is this actually comfortable? Or is this a comfortable discomfort? We're often living in that comfortable discomfort. And even though we know like it's going to be hard to take the steps, it's going to be hard to push myself, I'm going to experience anxiety, we don't stop to recognize what we're currently doing and what we're currently in, and the steps that we're currently taking aren't leaving us feeling good, right? We're not feeling the way that we want to feel, and we're not living life how we want to live it. So I encourage you just take one small step at a time to push yourself outside of your comfort zone, because this is where you experience that healing. Okay, I hope these 4 things have been helpful and have given you some insights. And remember, please don't go making a bunch of changes at once. I always say small steps for a reason, because the small steps are the things that actually help you to support your mind and body and to feel better and to experience that long-term healing. And please keep me updated. I would love to hear if you've already made some of these shifts, if you're currently making them, let me know. I would love to hear it. And until next time, keep taking healthy action. I hope you enjoyed this episode of A Healthy Push. If you want more, head on over to ahealthypush.com for the show notes and lots more tips, tools, and inspiration that will support your recovery. And if you're hoping for me to cover a certain topic, be sure to join my Instagram community at A Healthy Push and let me know in the comments what you want to hear next.